Hello and welcome to our channel Simply Sociology. Today we are going to learn about the demographic structure of Indian society. But first we have to learn about the word demography. Demography is made up of two Greek words, demo and graphin. Demo means people and graphin means description. It means description of people of an area is known as demography. But in our definition, we can say that systematic study of population is known as demography. There are three main components of demography: birth rate, death rate, and migration. These components help us to understand how a population grows, declines, or changes over time. So let's understand each one and its impact. Birth rate refers to the number of live births per thousand people in a population in a year. The places have high birth rate have high population. For example, states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh have large population due to higher birth rates. On the other hand, states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Goa, due to better education, family planning, and healthcare, have lower birth rates and so a smaller population growth. Now understand the death rate. Death rate refers to the number of deaths per thousand people in a population in a year. For example, states like Kerala have low death rates because of better healthcare, nutrition, and sanitation. People live longer, life expectancy is higher, and the elderly population is larger. While some states with limited healthcare facilities or higher disease prevalence have higher death rates, which slows down population growth. Now we can relate both the components easily. If birth rate is higher than the death rate, population will increase. But if death rate is higher than the birth rate, the population will decrease. Now, let's understand the third most important factor related to demographic change is migration. Migration refers to the movement of people from one place to another, either within a country or across national boundaries. For a considerable period of time, unlike birth or death, migration does not change the total population of a country immediately, but it changes the distribution of population, especially between rural and urban areas. We can divide migration into two types: internal migration and external migration. Internal migration refers to the movement of people within a country. The most common form of internal migration in India is rural to urban migration. In villages, agriculture is the main occupation, but it does not provide regular employment throughout the year. Many people depend on seasonal work, small land holdings, or daily wages. Due to uncertain income, poverty, lack of education, healthcare, and limited opportunities, people are forced to leave villages. These conditions are known as push factors. Cities attract people because they offer employment opportunities in industries, construction, shops, and service sector. Urban areas provide better wages, occupational freedom, education, healthcare, and modern facilities. These attractions are called pull factors. The rigid caste system in Indian villages also contributes to internal migration. So we can say that socio-cultural factors are also responsible for the migration of rural to urban areas. For example, upper caste groups may not be allowed to take up certain occupations considered low status. Due to fear of loss of prestige and social boycott, they migrate to cities where caste restrictions are weaker and occupational freedom is greater. In opposite, lower caste groups face discrimination, low wages, lack of dignity, and social exclusion in villages. Even when education or skilled, they are often judged by caste rather than their abilities. Cities offer relatively more equality, independence, and dignity, which encourages migration. Thus, internal migration in India occurs due to a combination of rural push factors and urban pull factors, along with social factors like caste. Now, come to learn about the external migration. External migration refers to the movement of people from one country to another. It is of two types: immigration and emigration. Immigration means the entry of people into a country from another country. For example, when people from neighboring countries come to India for work, education, or safety, it is called immigration. Immigration increases the population of the receiving country, while emigration means the movement of people out of a country to another country. For example, when Indians move to countries like the USA, Canada, Gulf countries, or Australia for better employment opportunities, it is called emigration. Emigration reduces the population of the country of origin. In India, external migration is mainly driven by economic opportunities, education, skilled employment, and sometimes political or social reasons. Migration plays an important role in shaping India's demographic structure. Internal migration leads to rapid urbanization. Cities become overcrowded while villages lose young population. The working age population shifts from rural to urban areas. External migration affects population size, workforce composition, and remittances. Thus, migration affects population distribution, age structure, and sex ratio. Now, let's understand another important term related to the movement of people known as displacement. In sociology, displacement does not mean only moving from one place to another. Displacement refers to the forced movement of people or the shifting of social and economic pressure due to development, government policies, or power imbalance in society. Displacement is not by choice. Migration is voluntary, but displacement is forced. It happens due to social, economic, and political reasons. Displacement usually happens because of large development projects such as dams, highways, factories, industrialization and urbanization, wars, riots, or natural disasters. Displacement is closely connected with power and authority. Suppose a dam is being built in a rural or tribal area. The government says this project is for national development, but the villagers lose their land, their homes, their traditional occupations. As a result, they are forced to move to cities. Now we can ask ourselves the two important questions. Did development happens? Of course, yes. Did displacement happens? Of course, again yes. This situation is known as development induced displacement. We will study this issue in details in our next chapter, Social Institutions, Continuity and Change. Now we will learn about the types of demography. There are two main types of demography: formal demography and social demography. Formal demography focuses on the numerical and statistical aspects of population, such as birth rate, death rate, fertility rate, and life expectancy, only on numbers. For example, calculating the birth rate or death rate of India using census data is an example of formal demography. while social demography studies population in relation to social factors such as education, occupation, caste, religion, health, and migration. For example, studying how education of women reduces birth rate in Kerala is an example of social demography. In simple words, social demography does not just look at numbers, it also studies the social and cultural factors behind those numbers. Now, let us understand the importance of demographic data and how it began. Demographic data is very important because it helps the government understand its population. With the help of population data, government can plan schools, hospitals, employment, housing, transport and welfare schemes. It also helps in understanding major social problems such as overpopulation, unemployment, poverty, aging population, and migration. Without demographic data, proper planning and development are not possible. The scientific study of population did not begin suddenly in the 18th century. Its roots can be traced back to the 17th century. The earliest demographic study was carried out in England in 1662 by John Graunt, who analyzed birth and death records of London and published his work titled Natural and Political Observation Made upon the Bills of Mortality. This study laid the foundation of modern demography by showing how population data could be systematically collected and analyzed. That is why John Graunt is called the father of demography. Later, during the 18th century, with the formation of nation states and the development of statistics, demography developed as a proper and organized discipline. As the modern state expanded its role, the government began taking active interest in various spheres of society, such as policing and maintenance of law and order, health, economy, agriculture, industry, taxation, and revenue generation. To manage these expanding responsibilities, the state required regular, systematic, and quantitative data about its population. This growing need led to the beginning of modern census operations. The American census of 1790 is considered the first modern census. In India, censuses began to be conducted by the British Indian government between 1867 and 1872, and regular 10 yearly decennial censuses have been conducted since 1881. After independence, India continued this practice, and 7 decennial censuses have been conducted since 1951, the most recent being in 2011. The Indian census is the largest census in the world. Now, we are going to learn about the two very important theories in demography. The first is the Malthusian theory, and the second is the demographic transition theory. The first theory was given by famous English economist Thomas Robert Malthus, who lived during the 18th century. In 1798, he wrote a very important book called An Essay on the Principle of Population. In this book, he tried to explain how population grows and what problems it can create if it increases faster than the resources available, especially food. So, what did Malthus say exactly? He believed that population has a natural tendency to grow very fast, much faster than the production of food. According to him, population increases in a geometrical pattern, meaning it doubles like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. But food production increases only in an arithmetic pattern like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now think about it. If population grows faster than food, what happens? Malthus argued that population will always overtake food supply, and because of this, people are bound to suffer from poverty, hunger, and starvation. This is why he said that controlling population growth is very important to improve human prosperity. He suggested two ways to control population growth. First is preventive checks. Preventive checks refers to measures like moral restraint, celibacy, and postponing marriage. In simple words, it means that humans must control themselves and voluntarily limit population growth. Second is positive checks. Positive checks are natural or unavoidable factors like famine, disease, wars, and epidemics that increase the death rate and reduce population naturally. In other words, if humans do not control population growth themselves, nature steps in. But was he right? Well, later on, his predictions were criticized. Despite rapid production growth, food production increased due to scientific and technological advancement, and standard of living also improved. Malthus was also criticized by liberal and Marxist thinkers who argued that poverty and starvation are not caused by population growth but by the unequal distribution of wealth and resources. Still, why is Malthus important? Even though some of his predictions were wrong, his work was the first systematic attempt to explain the relationship between population and resources, and it laid the foundation for modern demography. Now, let's discuss the demographic transition theory. After the limitation and failure of the Malthusian theory, a new demographic theory was developed which explained population change in relation to the economic development of a country. This theory is known as the demographic transition theory. This theory suggests that population growth is closely linked to a country's level of economic development. In other words, as a society develops, the pattern of population growth also change. According to this theory, every society goes through three main stages of population growth. Stage 1. It related to low population growth. In this first stage, both birth rate and death rate are high. So the overall population growth is very slow. This stage is typical of underdeveloped societies where technology is limited, healthcare is poor, and living conditions are harsh. Stage 2. This stage is related to high population growth. In the second stage, death rate falls due to improvement in healthcare, sanitation, and food supply. But the birth rate remains high because of cultural and social reasons. This leads to a population explosion. Most developing countries today are in this stage. Stage 3. This stage is also related to the low population growth again. In the third stage, which is seen in developed countries, both birth rate and death rate are low. This is due to better education, urbanization, family planning, and higher living standards. As a result, population growth slows down and stabilizes. So, in simple words, as countries developed economically and socially, population growth first rises rapidly and then slows down, eventually reaching a stable level. Now let's understand the size and growth of India's population. When we say population size, we simply mean the total number of people living in a country. India has one of the largest population in the world. For many years, India was second after China. And in 2023, India surpasses China and became the most populous country in the world. This shows how huge our population base is. Now, the big question is, did India's population always grow fast? No, not at all. Let us first understand the meaning of population growth. Population growth means the increase in the number of people over a period of time. Now let us see how India's population changed over time. India's population history is divided into four phases. Before 1921, from 1921 to 1951, from 1951 to 1981, and after 1981. Before 1921, population growth was slow and irregular because the death rate was very high. The death rate was high due to epidemic, pandemic, famine, and starvation. An epidemic is a disease that spreads in a particular area or country, while a pandemic spreads across many countries or the whole world. The influenza pandemic of 1918 killed millions of people in India. Famine means extreme shortage of food in a region, and starvation refers to people dying due to lack of food. Because of these problems, many people died early, so even though the birth rate was high, the population did not grow much. Between 1911 and 1921, India's population growth was even negative. The year 1921 is called the year of Great Divide because it divides India's population history into two parts. Before 1921, growth rate was slow. After 1921, population started increasing steadily. From 1921 to 1951, medical facilities, sanitation, vaccination, and food supply improved. As a result, the death rate began to fall and population started increasing steadily. However, after independence, the quality of population was poor. There was illiteracy, unemployment, and poverty. The government adopted a twofold strategy. Family planning programs were introduced to control population growth, and development programs were launched to improve the quality of life. The Green Revolution increased food production, and large industries, dams, and highways were built to generate employment and promote economic development. From 1951 to 1981, India experienced very rapid population growth. Hospitals increased, vaccination expanded, and food production improved. The death rate fell sharply, but the birth rate remained high. Because of this, population increased very fast. This period is known as the period of population explosion. After 1981, the population growth rate started declining due to education, urbanization, awareness, and family planning. Families began to have fewer children. However, population is still growing because India already has a very large base population. A large number of young population are entering the reproductive age group. This is called population momentum. Now we must understand why population size is important. In India, population is often blamed for many problems. But population can be both an opportunity and a challenge. A large population means a large workforce. If people are educated, skilled, and employed, this becomes a demographic dividend, meaning population becomes a benefit for the country. India is one of the youngest countries in the world. The working age population is increasing, which can help India grow rapidly. But population becomes a challenge when there are not enough jobs, when education levels are low, when people lack skills, and when health facilities are insufficient. In India, unemployment is high. There is disguised unemployment in agriculture, and many workers lack proper training. So, India has the potential for demographic dividend, but we must convert this potential into reality. India's population history shows a shift from slow growth to rapid growth and now towards slower growth. Population is not a problem in itself. An uneducated and unskilled population is the real problems. If India educates, trains and employs its youth, population will become its greatest strength. As we have already understood, India's population increased very rapidly after independence. Death rates declined due to better medical care, but birth rates remained high. To manage this population pressure, the Government of India started the Family Planning Program. India became the first country in the world to launch an official national family planning program in 1952. The main aim of the program was to help families decide the number of children and spacing between births according to their income, health, and living conditions. This would improve both family welfare and national development. The family planning program brought several important advantages. Over time, birth rates gradually declined, which helped to slow down rapid population growth. Proper spacing between children improved the health of mothers and reduced infant and maternal deaths. Better healthcare services also increased life expectancy, which means the average number of years a person is expected to live. So people began living longer. The program also increased awareness among people about contraception, reproductive health, and responsible parenthood. Smaller families led to a better standard of living, as parents could provide better nutrition, education, and care for their children. It also supported women's empowerment by giving women greater control over reproduction, education, and employment opportunities. In addition, various government schemes related to education, health, nutrition, and skill development indirectly strengthened overall family welfare. A major turning point came when the sitting Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, declared a state of emergency in India on 25th June 1975. This period of authoritarian rule continued until 21st March 1977. Authoritarian rule is a system where power is concentrated in the hands of one leader or a small group, and people's freedom and rights are limited. In such a situation, the government takes strict control over administration. People cannot freely oppose government decisions. Freedom of speech and protest is restricted. Decisions are imposed from the top, not based on public consent. The focus is on obedience rather than participation. During India's emergency, this type of rule meant that many decisions, including family planning measures, were implemented with pressure instead of voluntary choice. At that time, forced sterilization of both men and women took place. Government officials were given targets and they used pressure to meet them. The people who suffered the most were the poor, illiterate, and powerless sections of society. Because of this situation, many people became afraid of hospitals and health centers. They thought that if they went there, they might be forced to undergo sterilization. As a result, public trust in the program declined sharply. They began to associate the term family planning with government force, loss of personal choices, fear of doctors and hospitals, so the name itself started creating fear, anger, and distrust, especially in rural and poor communities. After 1977, when a new government was formed under Prime Minister Morarji Desai, the leaders understood that population control cannot be successful through pressure and force. They realized that people's trust had been damaged during the emergency period, so the approach needed to change. And the program was renamed the Family Welfare Program. This change of name was important because it shifted the focus from controlling population numbers to improving the overall well being of families. The approach became voluntary and welfare oriented. Today, India follows a rights based and welfare oriented approach where family planning is based on awareness, healthcare, and voluntary decision making, which is essential for building a healthy and educated population. Now let's understand about age structure. Age structure refers to the distribution of population into different age groups: children, working age people, and elderly. It tells us what proportion of people are young, adults, or old in a country. This is important because each age group has different needs and roles in society. Children, usually below 14 years, are dependents. They do not earn, yet they require food, education, vaccination, and proper care. The working age group, roughly between 15 to 60 years, is economically active. These people earn, produce goods and services, and support society. The elderly population above 60 years are mostly retired and often depend on family or social support. So age structure help us understand whether a country has more dependents or more earners. If a country has a very large number of children, the working population has to support many non-working people. The government must spend more on schools, teachers, nutrition programs, and child health care. This increases the dependency burden. On the other hand, when the working age population is high compared to dependents, the country gets better chances for economic growth and development. More people are earning, producing, and paying taxes. This favorable situation is known as the demographic dividend. But age structure is not fixed. It keeps changing over time. Developed countries usually have more elderly people and fewer children because birth rates are low and life expectancy is high. Developing countries like India traditionally have more children and young population, though this is slowly changing. This brings us to the dependency ratio. Dependency ratio is a demographic indicator that shows the number of dependents, children, and elderly compared to the working age population. It helps us understand how many non-working people are supported by working population. It also affects taxation, government revenue, and planning for welfare schemes. A lower dependency ratio is generally better because fewer dependents are supported by more working people. But if dependency ratio rises due to an aging population, it becomes a serious concern. A smaller working group has to support a large number of elderly people, which increases pressure on healthcare system, pensions, and social security. For example, in countries like Japan and Italy, where large proportions of the population are elderly, a shrinking workforce has made it harder to sustain healthcare services and pension schemes, putting economic and social strain on the nation. Now let us connect this with fertility. Total fertility rate refers to the average number of children a woman is expected to give birth during her childbearing years, usually 15 to 49 years. In India, fertility rates have declined significantly over the past decades. From around 6 children per woman in the 1950s, it has fallen to near replacement level in recent years. This decline happened because of better healthcare, lower infant mortality, spread of education, urbanization, and especially the empowerment of women. through education, jobs, and awareness of family planning. When fertility declines, fewer children are born. Over time, this changes the age structure. The child population becomes smaller and later the working population also reduces. Meanwhile, because people live longer, the elderly population increases. This leads us to the idea of replacement level. Replacement level is the level of fertility at which a population exactly replaces itself from one generation to the next, meaning births and deaths are almost equal and the population becomes stable. The standard value of the replacement level is about 2.1 children per woman. 2 replaces the parents and zero point 0.1 accounts for child mortality and people who do not reproduce. States like Kerala have reached or gone below replacement level due to high literacy, better health services, and awareness. While states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar still have higher fertility and population growth due to poverty, lower literacy, early marriage, and less access to health and family planning services. These regional differences show how social and economic conditions influence population patterns. Another important tool to study age structure is the age sex pyramid. An age sex pyramid is a graph that shows the distribution of population by age and sex. Males are shown on one side and females on the other. Youngest at the bottom and eldest at the top. When birth rates are high, the pyramid looks wide at the base. When a country has more elderly people, the top becomes wider. It helps us understand present structure, past trends, and future population needs. Government use it to plan school, jobs, hospitals, and social services. So overall, age structure is extremely important because it affects dependency ratio, economic growth, demands for education, employment, healthcare, and social security. It helps us predict future population problems and development needs. That is why studying age structure is not just about numbers, it is about understanding the present and future of society. After studying the age structure of the country, the next important concept we understand is the sex ratio. This is the ratio between males and females in a population. Sex ratio refers to the number of females per thousand male in a population. It is an important indicator of the social and cultural conditions of a country and not merely a biological fact. Biologically, nature produces slightly more boys than girls at birth. However, across the world, the total number of women is usually higher than men. This seems to be due to two reasons. First, the girl babies have more resistant to diseases in infancy than boy babies. Second, the life cycle. Women have tended to live more than the men so that there are more old women than men in most societies. Therefore, if social conditions are fair and equal, the sex ratio should naturally become balanced or even favorable to women over time. India's sex ratio has shown slow improvement in recent years, yet it remains unfavorable compared to many countries. This clearly indicates that the problem of low sex ratio in India is not biological but social. Despite laws and government schemes promoting the girl child like Beti Bachao Beti Padhao, the causes behind low sex ratio are deep rooted social practices like patriarchy and son preferences mindset, continued practice of sex selective abortion, neglect of girls' health and nutrition, female infanticides, in some areas, higher female mortality due to early marriage and poor health care continue to affect the sex ratio. Now come to know about child sex ratio. Child sex ratio refers to the number of girls per 1000 boys in the age group of 0 to 6 years. It is a very sensitive indicator because it reflects recent social behavior, especially attitude towards the girl child. Unlike overall sex ratio, child sex ratio is directly influenced by human decisions, not natural survival differences. An important question that arises is why the child sex ratio is declining in India. The decline in child sex ratio is not natural or biological, but is mainly due to social factors. The major reasons are in many families, sons are preferred over daughters, especially in small families due to social, cultural, and economic reasons. Modern medical technology is misused to identify the sex of the fetus, leading to abortion of female fetuses. With the spread of the small family norms, parents want one or two children only, but they insist on having a male child. Despite being illegal, ultrasound and other diagnostic tools are often misused for sex determination. Although laws like the PCPNDT Act exist, poor enforcement in some regions allows such practices to continue. The PCPNDT Act or the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act 1994 was passed by the Government of India to stop the misuse of medical technology for determining the sex of a child before birth. The main aim of this act is to ban sex determination tests and prevent sex selective abortion, which have led to a declining child sex ratio in India. Under this act, it is illegal to determine or disclose the sex of the fetus before birth. Medical tests like ultrasound can be used only for detecting genetic disorder or health problems, not for knowing whether the child is a boy or girl. The Act strictly regulates ultrasound clinics and diagnostic centers. All such clinics must be mandatorily registered with the government and their records are regularly monitored. If a doctor or clinic is found conducting or promoting sex determination tests, they can be punished under the law. Even parents or family members who request such tests are considered guilty and can be punished. The punishment under the PCPNDT Act include imprisonment, heavy fines, and cancellation of the doctor's medical license. These strict provisions are meant to protect the rights of the girl child and promote gender equality in society. Thus, the declining child sex ratio in India is a result of human decisions and patriarchal attitudes, not biological factors. This shows that the decline in child sex ratio is man made, not natural. Let's know about the regional pattern of child sex ratio in India. The child sex ratio does not decline uniformly across India. There are clear regional differences reflecting culture, patriarchy, and social attitudes. Regions with relatively higher child sex ratio are the eastern and northeastern states like Odisha, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, etc. show a relatively higher child sex ratio compared to many other regions. The main reasons for higher child sex ratio in these regions are in many eastern and tribal societies, sons are not strongly preferred over daughters, leading to a more balanced sex ratio. In these societies, patriarchy is less rigid, allowing women greater freedom, respect, and participation in social life. Limited access to private diagnostic clinics reduces the misuse of ultrasound and sex determination technology. Greater participation of women in economic activities makes daughters economically valuable, not a burden on the family. With the spread of the small family norm, families feel less pressure to have a son within one or two births. The relatively higher child sex ratio in these regions is mainly due to social and cultural factors and not necessarily because of higher economic development. Several northwestern and some southern states of India show a low child sex ratio. For example, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and parts of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Reasons for low child sex ratio in these regions are: sons are preferred due to social and cultural beliefs such as inheritance, family lineage, and old age support. Small family norms with pressure to ensure a male child. Better healthcare infrastructure and availability of private clinics make misuse of ultrasound and diagnostic techniques easier. Fear of dowry and high marriage cost leads families to view daughters as an economic burden. Although the law exists, poor implementation and social acceptance of legal illegal practices allow sex selective abortion to continue. It is concerning that even a state like Kerala, which has a high overall sex ratio, shows a low child sex ratio. This indicates that gender bias at birth persists, which may disturb the future balance of the sex ratio in the state. It also shows that development and literacy alone do not automatically eliminate patriarchal mindset or ensure gender equality. Now understand the consequences of an imbalanced sex ratio. It leads to shortage of women in marriageable age groups, which increases in crimes against women, forced marriages and trafficking, social instability and breakdown of family structure. We can improve sex ratio by education and empowerment of women, equal access to healthcare and nutrition, strict enforcement of laws, changing social attitudes towards daughters, promoting gender equality at all levels. Sex ratio is not just a number. Nature already gives women a survival advantage. If society treats boys and girls equally, the sex ratio will naturally improve. Only when girls are valued, protected, and educated, society can become balanced and truly developed. Literacy rate and its importance. As we understand, education is the most important tool for a nation to become developed and to control population growth. Education is directly related to the literacy rate of a country. Literacy rate refers to the percentage of people who can read and write with understanding in a population generally counted for people aged 7 years and above. Now let's understand about the importance of literacy rate. A higher literacy rate helps people acquire skills and better jobs, which increases income and contributes to national economic growth. Literate people are more aware of family planning, health services, and the consequences of large families, which helps in controlling population growth. Improvement in health and hygiene also create awareness about nutrition, sanitation, vaccination, and maternal and child health, leading to a healthier society. Education empowers people to take informed decisions, know their rights, and participate actively in social and political life. Literacy helps in reducing practices like child marriage, superstitions, gender discrimination, and exploitation. Now we will understand about the inequality in literacy rate. Despite its importance, literacy is not equally distributed in society. There are inequalities based on gender, caste, class, and region. Male literacy rate is higher than female literacy rate in many parts of India. Reasons include patriarchal mindset, early marriage of girls, household responsibilities, and lack of access to education for girls. Caste inequality. Historically, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes have lower literacy rate compared to upper caste groups. This is due to social discrimination, poverty, and lack of educational facilities. Class inequality. Children from economically well-off families have better access to quality education, while poor families often cannot afford school fee, books, or coachings, leading to higher dropout rates. Regional inequality. Some states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Himachal Pradesh have high literacy rates, while states like Bihar, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh have lower literacy rates due to poverty, poor infrastructure, and social factors. Rural urban inequalities. Urban areas have higher literacy rates because of better school, teachers, and facilities, while rural areas suffer from lack of schools, teachers, transport, and awareness. Now we can conclude that literacy rate is a key indicator of development. Improving literacy, especially among women, disadvantaged caste, the poor, and rural populations, is essential for achieving social equality, economic growth, and sustainable development. We have already studied migration, where people move from rural to urban areas in search of better education, healthcare, job, and freedom. Previously, rural areas were often characterized by dependence on agriculture for livelihood, low literacy rates, and limited schools, poor healthcare facilities, belief in superstitions, and social discrimination. Earlier, due to land reform, the Jamindari system was abolished. Many people had limited access to land and resources, forcing them to move from villages to towns and cities in search of livelihood. Because of these conditions, many people moved from rural areas to urban areas for better opportunities. But changes have occurred rapidly in rural areas in recent years. Due to advancement in transportation, communication, and government policies, the gap between rural and urban areas is reducing. Better transport facilities like roads and railway network have improved connectivity between villages and cities. Many people can now commute to urban areas for work and return home daily. Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana provides better road connectivity even to the villages situated in remote areas. Now, with the policies of compulsory elementary education for all, schools have been opened in almost every village. Childcare facilities like Anganwadis are available even in interior villages. People can also access education and skill programs online using the internet. Better healthcare facilities like vaccination and immunization programs have been introduced by the government. These supports the health policies of India and improves overall health in villages. Government schemes like Manrega, Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana and others provide employment in rural areas. Now villagers no longer have to move to cities for work. The standard of living is also improving. Internet facilities provide access to online education, skill development programs, and government services from villages. Mobile phones and computers are also helping villagers learn new skills and stay connected. Due to transport, communication, education, healthcare, employment schemes, and digital facilities, the rural urban differences are gradually reducing. People in villages now have better access to education, healthcare, employment, and information, which helps in balanced regional development. The Government of India has tried to improve people's health through national health policies. A health policy is a plan made by the government to improve public health, provide medical facilities, and ensure that treatment is available to everyone, not only to those who can afford it. India has introduced three major policies: 1983, 2002, and 2017, and each one reflects the health problems of its time. The 1983 policy was the first comprehensive policy. India was mainly facing infectious diseases and there was a shortage of hospitals, especially in villages. Therefore, the government focused on primary health care with the aim of health for all by 2000. Primary health centers were expanded and attention was given to prevention of diseases such as malaria, TB, and leprosy. After economic liberalization, private hospitals increased, and lifestyle diseases like diabetes and heart diseases became common. The 2002 policy therefore focused on strengthening public health infrastructure, increasing government spending, encouraging private sector participation, and giving special attention to rural and backward areas. It tried to control both communicable and non communicable diseases. The 2017 policy aims at universal health coverage, meaning everyone should get quality treatment at an affordable cost. It emphasizes preventive health care, strengthening primary health care, and reducing out of pocket expenditure so that families do not fall into poverty because of medical expenses. Health policy is important because a healthy population is necessary for development. It helps in improving public health and reducing infant mortality rate and maternal mortality ratio. Infant mortality rate means the number of babies who die before 1 year of age per thousand live births, while maternal mortality ratio means the number of women who die due to pregnancy or delivery complications per 100,000 live birth. IMR reflects child health and nutrition, whereas MMR shows the quality of maternity care. However, healthcare in India is still unequal. Women often receive less medical attention than men. Rich people can afford private hospitals while poor people depend on overcrowded government hospitals. Many scheduled caste and scheduled tribes communities face difficulties in accessing healthcare due to poverty and remoteness. Regional differences also exist, as some states have better facilities than others. In addition, urban areas have more hospitals and specialists, whereas rural areas often lack doctors, medicines, and transport. To address these issues, the government has launched programs such as the National Health Mission, Ayushman Bharat, Janani Suraksha Yojana, and the Pulse Polio program to provide free and low cost healthcare, especially for the poor. Although progress has been made, ensuring equal access to healthcare for all people remains an important challenge in India. I hope this topic is clear to you. If you face any difficulty, feel free to ask your questions in the comments. I will try my best to answer. Have a good day.